What do you make of Turki Al-Sheikh and the boxing going into Saudi? Obviously, there's been talk of this boxing league with Dana White being involved now as well. What do you think Turkey's having a positive impact on boxing?
I liked some of the matchups he made. I think I liked some of the matchups he made. I think they were interesting and they've been fun to watch. But it's interesting. Some of the things he was doing suddenly started to make me feel differently. Like for example, when he couldn't befriend Canelo, he put a competing he worked in a competing he worked in a competing UFC against him. You know, and on the night he fought Berlanga. But now, because Canelo decided to talk to him, it's okay. But now, the guy Canelo doesn't like and wants to avoid at all costs, Benavidez, all of a sudden is out of the circle of trust, so to speak, to take a quote from the movie Meet the Parents. But now you've thrown him out. You were talking about Benavidez and Bivol. Now you start working with Canelo, and all of a sudden, I'm not interested in Benavidez at all over here anymore. So very clicky, very I don't know, elitist to some degree, like uh takes pictures with the stars. I think, when you have that position, you sort of should act like the royalty you are, and sort of, I, I don't know, man. I'm still confused in some ways because I feel like he's backed the wrong horse. I don't think Dana White is the guy for this job. I don't think that you you go the Dana White route just because Dana doesn't have a very good reputation among any fighters at all, even in MMA. Also, there's an open market in boxing. It's not going to be that easy to just take over. When you're the only game in town, as MMA, UFC was in MMA for a long time. Because they were able to buy out the competition. Because buy out the competition, MMA was a relatively new sport, so the competition didn't cost as much to buy out, and you had Fertitta money to buy it out. Now you do have Ari Emanuel and Endeavor money. You do have Turki AlAlSheikh and Saudi Arabia money, but you also are dealing with promoters who have generational wealth and generational knowledge of the sport. Like Eddie Hearn, his father Barry was already a big promoter. Frank Warren and his son, generationally, they've done some of the biggest events in the sport. Bob Arum, So I'm not sure it's going to be that easy. It's just, you know, pay like you were paying in the UFC, which is basically crumbs compared to what big level boxing makes, and then think you're going to just attract the biggest names in the sport. How? Maybe you'll use Canelo as your shiny object. Or like, oh, you'll get to show off that he's fighting because Canelo also has no backbone. I mean, like you would think a guy like this that made all the boxing gave him all this money, you would think he would look out for the sport, but he still constantly looks out for himself. So he goes and does that deal, even though this guy was insulting him before, for money he'll allow himself to be bought, even though he has plenty of money already. So I don't know. I find it. I feel like Turkey Al-Sheikh backed the wrong horse. I felt like there was moments where Turkey was, could have been good for the sport, but I don't think he's in it for the right reasons. And I think some of the things that slip out of his mouth and slip out of his tongue sort of tell you that as well. He wants to do things his way. Um, I think, you know, Eddie and Frank should be ashamed of themselves for bringing this Trojan horse into the sport because he used them to come into the town, so to speak, and then he jumped ship and went to Dana White and kind of left them hanging high and dry. So I think Eddie and Frank should be the most ashamed of themselves for bringing this Trojan horse into the sport to begin with. But Dana, in my opinion, has no parameters, no morals, nothing. Has always been a very slimy, spineless kind of operator in the sport that he operates in. And I think is also a compulsive liar, and he's always been a compulsive liar. But just he comes from a fan base that is probably the least intelligent of all sports fan bases, which is the MMA fan base. I find it very difficult to find a dumber fan base than the MMA fan base. And not to say all MMA fans are dumb, but MMA fans are probably by far, it's not even close, the dumbest as a whole out of all sports fans, because you can see this guy is a constant lie. Even Bob Arum, all promoters do lie, but in boxing, we know that. So like we do take it with a grain of salt when they say something. MMA fans, when Dana White says something, he's got decades of a resume of lying, and they still take it as gospel anytime he says something. You would have to be levels below the stupidity line to keep believing this guy. But so why am I saying this? Because now he's saying, oh, what we're doing is not a league. What we're doing is a promotional company. No, what you're trying to do is a league. You want to eliminate the sanctioning bodies and you want to create your own rankings. Then you want to sign fighters to exclusive deals within these rankings. I see what you did in the UFC already. That's a league. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you got your own rankings and your own belt. You want to eliminate the Ali Act. I get it. That's a league, though. You can say whatever you want to say. If it looks like a duck, acts like a duck, and talks like a duck, it's a duck. So for me, um, I don't know that that can work in boxing. Certainly, I'd like it not to work because I think whoever the ones that lose out most are the fighters. Um, but I also don't think a guy with who, in my opinion, is that spineless and that slimy, um, can operate in such a competitive market like boxing. It's not MMA. It's much more competitive because it's been around for a lot longer and has more of a foundation, regardless of how shaky it always seems to be on that foundation.
Absolutely. Paulie, I want to thank you for your time.